A family in Ohio spent like $6,200 on a custom-built chicken coop. I mean, we're talking the automated door, the heated waters, the organic feed subscriptions, the whole 9 yards. And at the end of their first year, they were getting an average of 11 eggs a day. So they sat down at their kitchen table, pulled out all their receipts, did the actual math, and realized they were paying up to $14 for a single dozen eggs. $14.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for eggs they had to wake up at dawn to collect in the snow while literally shoveling manure.
Which is, yeah, that's just a staggering number when you put it in the context of the actual food economy.
Right.
Even if you look at the absolute peak of the grocery store egg crisis.
Yeah.
We're talking about, January 2023 when avian flu hit and prices went absolutely parabolic, making national news.
I remember that, yeah.
Store-bought eggs at that absolute peak were still only sitting around, like $4.82 a dozen at major U.S. retailers.
Oh.
So that family in Ohio, doing the manual labor themselves, was paying nearly 3 times the peak crisis price.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even factor in the hourly value of their own labor, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing that really gets me, the thing that makes this such a common tragedy, honestly. They didn't do anything wrong.
No, not by the internet standards.
Right. They didn't make some glaring mistake. They followed all the rules of modern internet homesteading. They built the coop perfectly to the specs they saw online. They bought the right starter flock. They provided the right enrichment. But almost everything people do when they start beginner homesteading in a suburban environment is mathematically and biologically backward.
It really is.
We are sitting here today looking at this fascinating stack of research. It's this comprehensive document called the Backyard Sufficiency Stack. And its entire mission for this deep dive is to shatter what it calls the 40-acre assumption.
Such a great term.
It is. It maps out the exact, and I mean the exact step-by-step blueprint for producing real budget-altering calories on a standard 0.19-acre suburban lot.
And it's a complete reframing of the problem. What this document does so brilliantly is it stops asking, how do we pretend to be farmers?
Right, playing farmer.
Exactly.
Right.
It starts asking, how do we offset 15 to 25% of a family of four's annual grocery budget inside of 90 days without buying new land, without quitting your day job, and without building a barn?
Which sounds impossible.
It does. But it treats the suburban lot not as a miniature farm, but as a highly optimized, high-density biological engine.
And there is a framework in this document that proves you should completely stop growing the one vegetable everyone gets so excited about every spring, but we'll get to that.
Oh, the gateway vegetable.
Yeah, but first, let's look at why standard advice is setting you up for absolute burnout. Let's unpack this 40-acre assumption, because you read that phrase and you immediately know the exact aesthetic it's talking about.
You absolutely do. If you pull up like any major homesteading YouTube channel right now, look at the visual language of the thumbnail. What is it?
Oh, it's sprawling.
Right, it's these 200-foot raised beds made of pristine cedar. It's mobile chicken tractors being dragged across endless, vibrant green pasture.
Yeah.
It's massive pig pens, dairy cows, and root cellars carved into these picturesque hillsides.
And a perfectly clean flannel shirt. I mean, don't forget the flannel.
Right, the pristine flannels is mandatory. But what's fascinating, and maybe a bit insidious, honestly, is that this is essentially lifestyle fiction for the average person.
Yeah.
It's aspirational content. And it has to be, because aspiration is what gets clicks and views. The people making that content generally fall into one of 3 categories, right?
Okay, what are they?
They either farm full-time, they moved to rural, unrestricted land a decade ago before prices skyrocketed, or their full-time, highly lucrative career is simply documenting the lifestyle itself.
So their farm is a set.
Their farm is actually a Hollywood set for their media business.
But aspiration is not a production plan.
Precisely. Let's look at the physical reality of the listener who might be driving to their corporate job right now. The median suburban lot in the United States is roughly 0.19 acres. That is about 8,276 square feet total.
Okay.
Now, subtract the footprint of your house, let's say 2,000 square feet. Subtract the driveway, the front walkway, the concrete patio in the back, the garage. You are left with maybe 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of usable grass.
Which, I mean, sounds like a lot until you try to put an actual farm on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's take that chicken tractor from the YouTube video. A chicken tractor is a floorless mobile pen. The whole biological premise of a chicken tractor is that you move it to fresh grass every single day.
So they can eat bugs and stuff.
Right, so the birds can forage for bugs,
Yeah.
eat fresh greens, and leave their manure behind to fertilize the soil. If you don't move it, The parasite load builds up, the birds get sick, and the soil gets burned by the concentrated nitrogen in their waste.
Makes sense.
So if you have a 10 by 10 foot tractor, that's 100 square feet of pasture used per day. In 30 days, you have used 3,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have literally run out of grass on a standard suburban lot in a single month. The land hasn't had time to recover. The math physically does not work. A suburbanite with a 40-hour work week simply does not have the space, let alone the capital or the time, to run these systems.
Okay, wait, time out. I hear the math on the chicken tractor, but I have to push back slightly here.
Sure.
People in the suburbs are growing some food, right? I mean, I walk around my neighborhood and I see raised beds. My neighbor has a whole setup on his side yard, and he posts pictures of his harvests every August. It's not totally impossible to grow food in the suburbs.
You are absolutely correct. They are growing something. But the critical distinction the source makes is that they aren't making a dent in their actual grocery bill.
Ah, I see.
They aren't growing sustenance.
Oh.
And that's because, consciously or not, they are optimizing for visual satisfaction and immediate culinary reward instead of caloric return.
Meaning they grow the fun stuff.
Right. They're growing cherry tomatoes, they're growing basil, they're growing a few cucumbers, maybe some radishes because they sprout fast.
Yeah, the classic salad garden.
And look, there is immense psychological value in that. It looks beautiful on a plate. A vine-ripened tomato tastes infinitely better than a store-bought one, and it connects you to the soil. But you cannot eat your way to food independence on garnishes.
That's a great way to put it.
If your goal is to insulate your family from grocery inflation, a bowl of cherry tomatoes is biologically insignificant.
Okay, this brings us to the concept in the document that completely blew my mind. The source lays out this metric called the calorie density per effort score.
Yes, the brutal reality check.
It really is. It's not some complex, multivariable academic formula. It's just forcing you to compare apples to apples, or rather, leaves to seeds. You mentioned the one vegetable everyone gets excited about. Let's do the math on lettuce. Everyone's first garden project is putting lettuce in a standard 4x8 raised bed, right?
Oh yeah, the classic spring mix. It's the gateway crop because the seeds are cheap and it grows fast.
But let's look at the actual output of that 72 square foot box. The expert math in this document is devastating.
It really is.
A 4x8 bed yields roughly 10 to 12 mature heads of lettuce per season, assuming you space them properly so they don't rot. Let's use romaine as our baseline. A full head of romaine has about 106 calories.
Right.
Your entire 32 square foot bed, taking up premium real estate in your yard, requiring daily watering, weeding, and pest control for months, yields maybe 1,200 calories for the entire season.
To put that in perspective, a single adult male requires roughly 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day just to maintain body weight.
Right. So your entire season's harvest from that massive wooden box doesn't even provide half a day's worth of baseline energy for one human. You are essentially doing months of labor to grow crunchy water.
Crunchy water,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, take that exact same 32 square feet, same dirt, same sunlight, same daily watering effort. But instead of lettuce, you plant dry beans. We're talking navy beans, black beans, pinto beans.
And this is where we have to look at the biology of the plant. Why are beans different?
Yeah, why?
Well, lettuce is a vegetative crop. You are eating the leaf. The biological purpose of a leaf is simply to act as a solar panel and a water transport system. It is purposefully devoid of dense energy because the plant doesn't store energy in its solar panels.
That makes total sense.
But a dry bean, that is a seed. The biological purpose of a seed is to pack as much dense carbohydrate, protein, and fat into a tiny armored shell as possible so that the embryo inside can survive the winter and have enough fuel to push a root through the soil next spring.
Oh, wow.
When you grow beans, you are harvesting the plant's energy vaults.
And the yield difference is staggering. Dry beans yield about half a pound to 3/4 of a pound per square foot of soil. In that same 4x8 bed, you get 16 to 24 pounds of dry beans.
Which is a massive amount of food.
Yeah. Dry beans sit at roughly 1,600 calories per pound. Do the math. You are pulling 25,600 to 38,400 calories from the exact same dirt that give you 1,200 calories of lettuce.
That is a 25x to 30x difference in actual human food energy from an identical physical footprint.
It's like finding out you've been investing your money in an account that yields 0.1% interest when there's an account right next to it yielding 30%. It completely changes how you look at a garden space.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to that burnout cycle we mentioned earlier, it explains exactly why beginners quit.
Yeah, they just run out of steam.
They spend hundreds of dollars on cedar lumber and organic bagged soil. They spend 20 minutes watering every evening. They fight off the slugs. And at the end of the season, they look at their grocery bill and it hasn't dropped by a single dollar.
They feel like failures.
Right. They feel like failures, but they didn't fail at gardening. They succeeded at growing 1,200 calories. They failed at system design.
Right. And we're not saying don't grow lettuce. If you love a fresh salad, plant a little box of it near the kitchen door. But if your mission is to shrink your food budget and build actual household sufficiency, you have to be ruthless about the return on your effort. You have to focus on calories.
Which perfectly sets up the first major system in the backyard sufficiency stack. Because even if you maximize your raised beds with beans, you are mostly getting carbohydrates and incomplete plant proteins.
Right.
To replace the most expensive items on your grocery receipt, you need dense protein.
And here is where the document takes a hard left turn that I absolutely love. Wait, because this is wild. You can fit an entire production system that offsets a massive chunk of a family's protein needs in under 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
But the highest yielding leg of this system, the true anchor of the stack, doesn't even go outside.
It is completely counterintuitive to the homesteader mindset, which is always focused on the outdoors.
I mean, when you hear the word mushrooms, you think of a fancy garnish for a steak or maybe something you slice onto a Friday night pizza. It feels like a culinary extra. But the source makes the argument that it is actually the most efficient protein engine you can possibly run in a suburban house.
The disconnect here is fascinating. There is this huge gap between how mysterious and difficult people think mushrooms are to grow and how straightforward they actually are once you understand the mechanism.
Okay.
We are specifically looking at oyster mushrooms, Pleurotus astretus, which is the pearl oyster, and Pleurotus oryngii, the king oyster. The fundamental mental shift you have to make right now is that you are not gardening.
Okay, so what am I doing?
You are not dealing with seasons or soil depletion or unpredictable weather or aphids eating your leaves. You are managing a highly controlled biological bioreactor.
So it's like running a microbrewery instead of a farm. You're just managing a fermentation cycle.
That is the perfect analogy. In a brewery, you give yeast sugars, you control the temperature, and it gives you alcohol. With oyster mushrooms, you give the mycelium, cellulose, and lignin, you control the humidity, and it gives you dense, edible, fruiting bodies.
Wow.
Let's look at how Pleurotus astretus operates in the wild. It grows on dead or dying hardwood trees. It is a primary decomposer. It literally secretes powerful enzymes that break down the hard, woody material of the tree, turning it into simple sugars that it absorbs to build its network.
That's intense.
Right. In a suburban setting, we are simply recreating a dying tree trunk inside a plastic bag, but we are optimizing every variable so it happens in weeks instead of years.
Okay, so walk me through the actual mechanics of this indoor bioreactor. How does someone start?
The fundamentals take 3 very specific steps. First, you take a substrate. This is the dead tree. Usually this is chopped wheat straw or hardwood sawdust pellets. But you can't just throw mushroom spawn onto wet straw because millions of other wild mold and bacteria spores are already on that straw, and they will outcompete your mushrooms.
Oh, right, competition.
Exactly. So you have to pasteurize it. You submerge the straw in hot water, around 160 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, for about an hour. This doesn't sterilize it completely, but it kills off the competing organisms, giving your oyster mycelium a massive head start.
It clears the battlefield.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Once it cools, you inoculate it. You mix in oyster mushroom green spawn, which is just rye or millet grain that has been fully colonized by the mushroom tissue.
Okay.
Step 2 is the incubation phase. You put this mixed substrate into a plastic grow bag or a bucket with holes drilled in it, and you put it in a dark, warm place around 75 degrees for 2 to 3 weeks.
Just let it sit there.
Just let it sit.
Yeah.
During this time, the mycelium, which looks like white, fuzzy root threads, races through the substrate, eating the straw and knitting it together into a solid white block.
And then comes the magic trick.
Right. Step 3 is the fruiting trigger. A block of mycelium will sit there doing nothing unless it thinks it's time to reproduce. In nature, what tells a fungus on a dead log to produce a mushroom?
A change in the weather, like autumn rolling in.
Precisely. A drop in temperature, an increase in fresh oxygen, and higher humidity. So you take your fully colonized block out of the warm closet and you introduce it to a fruiting chamber. which is just a simple, cheap plastic grow tent with a humidifier.
Okay.
You drop the temperature to 60 or 65 degrees, you pump in fresh air, and you keep the humidity high. 5 to 7 days later, mushrooms literally erupt out of the block.
And the numbers on this are what convinced me. It is a terrifyingly efficient organism. A standard 5-pound block of hardwood sawdust substrate produces 1.5 to 2.5 pounds of mushrooms just in its first flush.
Which is incredible.
It really is. That is a 30 to 50% biological efficiency immediately. The organism converts up to half the dry weight of the wood into edible food. And then, this is the crazy part, it rests for a week and it flushes again.
Yep.
And then a third time. You can pull 3 to 4 pounds of mushrooms out of one 5-pound block over a 2-month period.
Let's scale those numbers up so the listener can see why this is the anchor of the backyard stack. Let's say you dedicate a 10 by 10 indoor space to this.
Okay.
A corner of an unfinished basement, a spare bedroom, a section of an insulated garage. That is 100 square feet. If you run a rotation of 50 blocks in that space, meaning every week you are making a few new blocks and throwing out a few spent ones, you are producing an average of 150 to 200 pounds of oyster mushrooms every single year.
Which translates to massive grocery savings. Oyster mushrooms aren't cheap white button mushrooms. They are a premium product. If you look at grocery store prices, they run $6 to $10 a pound.
At least.
At local farmers markets, they fetch $8 to $14 a pound. That means your little 10 by 10 basement corner is producing $1,200 to $1,600 worth of grocery equivalent value annually.
Yes.
But I can already hear the skeptics. I hear them saying, okay, that's a cool science experiment, and I'm sure it tastes great in a stir fry, but I can't feed my kids a plate of mushrooms for dinner. It's just a flavor enhancer. Where are the calories?
And that is the biggest, most pervasive misconception about the nutritional profile of this specific fungus. People confuse mushrooms with celery or cucumbers. They think it's just water and fiber.
Right.
Oyster mushrooms sit at roughly 3.3 grams of protein per 100 grams of fresh weight. Now, you are correct. They are not a dense calorie bomb like a potato or a piece of beef, but they are a nutritional puzzle piece that perfectly fills the exact gaps left by a standard suburban backyard system.
What kind of gaps?
Specifically, amino acids. Plant proteins, like the beans we talked about earlier, are generally incomplete. They are missing one or more essential amino acids that the human body cannot produce on its own.
Oh, I see.
Oyster mushrooms are one of the rare non-animal sources of complete protein. They contain all 9 essential amino acids required for human health.
Which is incredibly hard to get if you don't have acreage for cattle or pigs.
Exactly. Beyond the complete protein, they are biochemical factories. They contain ergothioneine, which is this incredibly potent, rare antioxidant that protects cellular DNA from oxidative stress, and you hardly find it anywhere else in the human diet in those concentrations.
Wow.
They're loaded with B vitamins, specifically niacin and riboflavin, which are crucial for energy metabolism. And here is a biological hack the source mentioned.
Oh, this part is so cool.
It is. Mushrooms contain a compound called ergosterol. If you expose your fruiting oyster mushrooms to even 10 to 15 minutes of direct sunlight, actual UV light, right before you harvest them, that ergosterol converts into meaningful amounts of vitamin D2.
So you can literally hack the fungus to produce a vital nutrient that normally requires dairy or direct human sun exposure.
You're custom manufacturing vitamins in your basement. So if you think about the holistic backyard system, your container garden provides the dense carbohydrates and fiber, your outside livestock provides the dense animal fat, and the mushrooms serve as the vital micronutrient, antioxidant, and complete amino acid bridge.
Okay, I'm sold on the biology, but let's get down to brass tacks. Because anytime someone pitches me an indoor grow system, my alarm bells go off.
Naturally.
I immediately see dollar signs. I'm picturing hydroponic cannabis setups with massive industrial ventilation tubes, thousands of dollars in high-pressure sodium lights, and a power bill that requires a second mortgage.
That's a very fair concern. But mushrooms don't use photosynthesis. They don't need intense grow lights. The first-year budget is actually shockingly low.
Yay, like how low?
To get started, you need a large metal pot for pasteurizing the straw in your stove, some heavy-duty plastic grow bags, a small multi-tier greenhouse tent, the kind you buy for $40 online to start tomato seedlings, a basic cool mist humidifier, and a digital thermometer hygrometer to track the environment. That entire hardware setup runs you maybe $150 to $300 up front.
What about the ongoing consumables, the substrate and the spawn?
The grain spawn from a reputable, high-quality supplier like Nordspor or Fungi Perfecti is maybe $20 to $30 for a bag, And that one bag of spawn can inoculate 20 to 30 pounds of wet substrate.
Okay, that's not bad.
And the substrate itself. If you use agricultural straw, you can often go to a local feed store and buy a massive 50-pound rectangular bale for $8 or $10. That one bale will last you months. You're easily under $400 for your entire first year of continuous production.
Okay, my skeptical alarm is ringing again. If it is this cheap, if it is this mathematically efficient, and if it produces complete proteins in a closet, why isn't every single homesteader on Earth doing it? What is the catch? Because there is always a catch.
The catch is that managing a biological cycle requires precision, and human beings are naturally impatient.
True.
Beginners fail because they fall into three very specific, very predictable environmental traps. The number one failure point, the absolute bane of indoor mushroom cultivation, is contamination. Specifically green mold, which is a species called trichoderma.
Oh, trochoderma. Green mold is the enemy of every indoor project. I mean, I've lost sourdough starters to it.
It is ruthless, it is airborne, and it grows significantly faster than oyster mycelium. And it almost always happens because the grower gets rushed.
Impatience again.
Yep. Remember the pasteurization step. You boil the straw at 160 degrees to kill the native organisms. But then you have to let that wet straw cool down completely to room temperature before you add your mushroom spawn. If you add the spawn when the straw is still 100 degrees, you will literally cook and kill the delicate mushroom tissue.
Oh, gee.
Beginners get impatient. They wait an hour. The straw feels lukewarm. They toss the spawn in and seal the bag. But the core of that straw is still too hot. The mushroom mycelium weakens or dies, and the trichoderma spores, which are naturally floating in the air of every house on Earth land, on that perfectly warm, wet, undefended food source.
And then it's game over.
Within 3 days, your bag is a solid block of powdery green death instead of white mycelium.
So patience is non-negotiable. What's the second trap?
The second trap is the physical environment of the fruiting chamber, specifically the humidity. Oyster mushrooms do not have skin like an apple to lock in moisture. They are essentially exposed nerve endings of water.
That sounds vulnerable.
Very. They require 80 to 95% relative humidity to fruit properly. If your tent drops below 80% because your humidifier ran out of water, the little baby mushroom pins will experience a micro-drought. They instantly abort, they dry up, turn yellow, and die.
But you can't just flood the tent either. Right?
Exactly. If you push the humidity over 97% and you don't have enough fresh air exchange, because mushrooms breathe the oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide just like we do water pools on the caps, they become waterlogged and they turn into a bacterial, rotting, slimy mess. Finding that perfect 85% humidity with gentle air movement is a balancing act.
Which, to be fair, is entirely solved by a $15 digital hygrometer and just paying attention.
Right. And the third trap is simply skipping the environmental trigger, the cold shock. We talked about how autumn triggers fruiting. If you leave your colonized blocks in that cozy 75-degree closet, you will stare at a beautiful white block of mycelium for 3 months, wondering why it isn't giving you food.
Because it's waiting for winter.
It is perfectly happy just existing. You have to actively shock it with a 10 to 15-degree temperature drop to convince it that winter is coming and it needs to reproduce immediately.
So it's a learning curve. But the source makes the point that once you dial that curve in, which takes maybe 2 or 3 practice runs to figure out your specific basement's microclimate, the labor curve flattens out entirely.
Completely.
You are spending maybe 15 minutes inoculating a few new blocks on a Tuesday night, 10 minutes moving older blocks into the fruiting tent on a Thursday, and 20 minutes harvesting and wiping down the tent on a Sunday. It takes a flat 45 minutes a week of active, hands-on time, 150 pounds of premium food for less than an hour a week.
It is the ultimate base layer for the Sufficiency stack because it has 0 seasonal spikes. It never peaks and overwhelms you in August the way a garden does. It is a steady, predictable hum of caloric production.
But as amazing as the mushrooms are, they don't provide the dense animal fats and heavy caloric load that a family needs to truly replace the meat section of their grocery budget. And this brings us to the outdoor component of the stack.
Here we go.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it, and I know this is a strong take that will upset some traditionalists. Chickens are a trap.
Oh boy.
If you have a normal 40-hour-a-week job, if you have kids with soccer practice, if you have a commute, chickens are a biological treadmill that you can never get off.
That is a very bold statement, considering backyard chickens are universally recognized as the gateway drug of the homesteading movement.
They are the gateway drug. But let's look at the actual mechanics of keeping them. You have to physically check them every single day. You have to walk out there and open the coop every morning so they can access the run. You have to walk out there and lock it up every single night, without fail, to protect them from raccoons, foxes, and neighborhood dogs.
That's true.
You have to check the waterers because chickens will kick pine shavings into them within 5 minutes. You have to check the feed, and you have to collect the eggs daily or they get crushed or eaten by snakes. It is a non-negotiable daily obligation for the entire lifespan of the animal, which can be 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, it's a long commitment.
If you want to take a weekend trip to see your parents, you have to hire a farm sitter to manage this complex daily routine. If you want a return on your investment that actually moves the needle on your grocery bill with massive chunks of meat without dominating your daily schedule, you want turkeys.
Okay, this brings up a critical distinction, because we need to define exactly what kind of animal we are talking about. When you say the word turkey, the listener immediately pictures that massive bowling ball-shaped pale bird sitting in the grocery store freezer in late November.
Right, the butterball.
That is the broad-breasted white. And to understand why we do not want that bird, we have to look at the history of agricultural industrialization in the 1950s.
Right, the post-WWII push for cheap, fast protein.
Exactly. The broad-breasted white is, for all intents and purposes, an industrial mutant. It was genetically selected over decades for one specific trait: extreme breast meat production, because the American consumer preferred white meat.
Okay.
The anatomical consequences of this selection are horrifying. The breast gets so massive so quickly that it shifts the bird's center of gravity entirely forward. Their legs often cannot support their own skeletal weight.
That is so sad.
It is. They hit a processing weight of 20 to 30 pounds in just 16 weeks. They cannot fly, they are terrible foragers, and biologically, they literally cannot reproduce naturally. The toms are physically incapable of mounting the hens. The entire global supply of commercial turkeys relies on artificial insemination. They are biological machines designed for high-density, factory farm feed programs. They are not designed for a backyard.
Which is why the backyard sufficiency stack specifically demands heritage turkeys.
Yes, heritage turkeys are the original American breeds that existed on almost every small farm and homestead before that 1950s industrialization took over. They retained all the evolutionary traits that make a small backyard flock viable.
Like what?
They can fly. They mate naturally, they have incredibly robust immune systems, and most importantly, they are aggressive, effective foragers.
The source breaks down the top 4 breeds for a suburban setup, and their profiles are fascinating. Let's walk through them. First up is the Narragansett. According to the document, this is the best all-around breed for a small flock.
Yes, very balanced.
They have a very calm disposition, which is vital if you have kids running around the yard. But their superpower is their foraging ability. They will actively hunt grasshoppers, ticks, crickets, and weed seeds, which directly lowers your commercial feed bill.
That's huge.
And if you actually want to breed them in year 2, the hens go broody and make excellent protective mothers. The males, the toms, hit 23 to 28 pounds, and the hens hit 14 to 18 pounds.
Then there's the Bourbon red. This bird is famous for one thing.
Yeah.
Flavor. In repeated blind taste tests conducted by organizations like the American Livestock Breeds Conservancy, the Bourbon red consistently beats commercial broad-breasted whites. It's not even close.
Why is the flavor so different? Is it just what they eat?
Diet is part of it. A bird eating fresh clover and grasshoppers tastes better than a bird eating soy pellets, but it's also biological. Because heritage birds grow slower, taking 24 to 28 weeks to mature instead of 16, their muscle fibers develop differently.
Oh, that makes sense.
The fat is distributed more evenly throughout the meat, rather than just sitting under the skin. It has a depth, a richness, and a firm texture that you just cannot buy in a commercial supermarket.
Yeah.
It tastes like actual meat, not just a protein sponge.
Then you also have the standard bronze, which was the absolute king of the American Thanksgiving table before the broad-breasted white took over.
Right.
The meat is notably darker overall, the fat profile is incredibly rich, and the flavor actually leans closer to a wild turkey, though they are completely domesticated. And finally, the document lists the black Spanish or black turkey. They are super cold tolerant, very calm, and a bit more moderate in size compared to the bronze, making them really manageable for a beginner trying to handle a bird for the first time.
Let's do the math on the economics here, because
Yeah.
this is where the debate of chicken versus turkey gets really stark, and it proves why the 40-acre assumption is flawed. Let's look at a standard starter flock of 4 heritage birds. Let's say 2 toms and 2 hens.
Okay, let's break down the year 1 setup costs. First, you need a brooder. That's the secure, warm environment they live in for the first 6 weeks as fragile babies. Usually, this is a large galvanized tub or a modified stock tank. You need the tub, a heat lamp, baby chick waterers,
Right.
and small feeders. That hardware is going to run you $60 to $90.
Yep.
The heritage poults themselves, the baby turkeys, are more expensive than chickens because they grow slower, and the hatcheries have to maintain breeding flocks year-round. They cost about $25 to $40 each from a good hatchery, so you're looking at $100 to $160 for 4 live poults shipped to your post office.
You have the ongoing cost feed.
Hmm.
A heritage bird takes longer to grow, so they eat over a longer timeline. 4 birds are going to consume roughly 200 to 250 pounds of high-protein game bird feed over a 26-week lifespan.
Okay.
At $20 to $30 a bag, depending on whether you go organic or conventional, that's $80 to $150 in feed. Finally, add in your processing supplies for November, a killing cone, sharp knife, and some heavy-duty vacuum-sealed packaging for another $80 to $150.
So if we tally that up, your total year-one investment is somewhere between $400 and $600 for 4 birds. Now, what do you actually get for that money? You get 4 birds processing out at an average dressed weight of 16 pounds each.
Which is fantastic.
It is. That is 60 to 65 pounds of premium, pasture-raised, organic equivalent meat going directly into your chest freezer. If you divide the cost by the yield, you're paying about $7 to $10 a pound in year 1.
Which, if we are being objective, is roughly what you would pay at a high-end specialty butcher or a local farm for a heritage bird anyway. Year 1 is essentially a break-even point, where you acquire the infrastructure for free while paying retail prices for the meat. But year 2 is where the economic math breaks wide open.
Because you don't have to buy the birds again.
Exactly. If you choose to keep a breeding trio, 1 tom and 2 hens over the winter, and let them reproduce naturally in the spring, your poult acquisition cost drops to absolute zero. You already own the brooder, the waterers, and the processing equipment.
That's incredible.
The only input cost in year 2 is the feed. When you divide just the feed cost by the 60 pounds of meat, your per-pound cost plummets to $3 to $5 a pound. You are now significantly undercutting the cost of even low-grade commercial birds at the grocery store, but you are feeding your family premium, nutrient-dense heritage meat.
The economics are undeniable, but this is the bit that really convinced me. The labor curve. I compared chickens to a never-ending treadmill earlier. Turkeys are a project. They have a defined start, a clear middle, and a definitive end.
It's what the source calls a U-shaped labor curve, and it is the absolute secret to avoiding homesteader burnout. Let's look at the calendar year, March and April. You spend maybe 3 or 4 hours total over 2 months setting up the brooder in the garage, testing the heat lamps, and ordering the birds online.
Easy enough.
Early May, the poults arrive at the post office. For the next 6 to 8 weeks, you have a moderate daily commitment, maybe 20 to 30 minutes a day to check the temperatures, refill the small waterers, and clean out the pine shavings.
It's intense, but it's short. Because in mid-June, they go outside. They move into a turkey tractor on the grass or a fixed pen with sturdy fencing. From June to October, your labor drops off a cliff down to 15 minutes a day.
Exactly.
You walk out, you top off their large bulk feeder, you fill the 5-gallon waterer, and you make sure they're alive. That's it. Heritage birds are basically self-sufficient tanks if they have access to fresh air, bugs, and grass.
Then comes November, the end of the U-curve. This is processing time, and we have to be honest, this is one intense, physically and emotionally demanding weekend.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It takes a full Saturday to ethically dispatch, pluck, and eviscerate 4 large birds. It takes half of Sunday to clean down your equipment, portion the meat, and vacuum seal everything for the freezer.
But then, from December to February, nothing. Absolute zero labor.
The best part?
No frozen water buckets to physically smash open with a hammer in January. No frost-bitten combs to worry about during a blizzard. No shoveling a path to the coop in 3 feet of snow. The entire turkey system completely turns itself off for 3 whole months. It is the perfect meat system for a family that wants to actually take a winter vacation without hiring a farm manager.
Now, we do need to address the fragility of the poults, though. Because if a listener hears this, gets excited, and decides to order heritage turkey poults tomorrow, they need to know that weeks 1 through 4 in the brooder are critical. Heritage turkey poults have a very well-earned reputation for finding incredibly creative, almost suicidal ways to die.
They really do. The source lists the 3 main causes of death in the first month, and the biology behind it is wild. Number 1 is drowning. baby turkeys will literally drown in a standard, shallow, half-inch deep chicken waterer.
And there's a physiological reason for this. Turkey poults have notoriously poor depth perception and underdeveloped neurological coordination in their first week of life compared to baby chicks.
They're just clumsy.
Very clumsy. They trip, they fall forward, their head goes into the shallow water trough, they panic, and because they lack the coordination to simply lift their head back up, they inhale water and drown in half an inch of liquid.
It sounds absurd, but it wipes out entire beginner flocks.
The solution is remarkably simple. You place glass marbles or small clean pebbles in the base of the water trough for the first 2 weeks. The water fills the gaps between the marbles.
Brilliant.
The poults can peck at the shiny marbles and drink the water between them, but they physically cannot submerge their nostrils or fall in. Alternatively, you train them on a closed nipple waterer system from day one, which completely eliminates open water.
Number 2 on the mortality list is chilling, and this comes down to basic physics. A tiny baby bird has a massive surface area to mass ratio. They lose heat incredibly fast, and they cannot regulate their own internal body temperature yet.
Right.
They need it hot. We are talking 95 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the brooder for the entire first week, slowly dropping by 5 degrees each subsequent week as they feather out.
The trap here is equipment failure. If you're relying on a single cheap heat lamp, and the bulb burns out at 2 a.m. in early May when the ambient garage temperature drops to 45 degrees, your entire flock will succumb to hypothermia and be dead by breakfast.
Oh, that's devastating.
The fail-safe protocol is mandatory. You must have 2 independent heat sources, 2 lamps, or a lamp and an electric brooder plate. And ideally, you drop a $15 wireless thermometer in the brooder that sends an alarm to your phone if the temperature dips below 85 degrees.
The third issue is digestive. Pasty butt and coccidiosis. Let's start with coccidiosis, which is a parasitic infection in the intestinal tract that flourishes in warm, damp bedding. The preventative measure is straightforward. You feed them a medicated starter feed that contains an amprolium blocker for the first few weeks, and you keep the bedding bone dry. But pasty butt is a more mechanical issue.
Pasty butt is exactly what it sounds like. Because a poult's digestive system is adapting to processed feed, their feces can be incredibly sticky. It gets stuck to the downy feathers around their cloaca. If you don't catch it, it dries like cement under the heat lamp. It completely seals the vent. The bird can no longer eliminate waste. The toxins back up into their system, and they die within 48 hours.
Which means you are committed to a daily visual inspection. You literally have to pick up every baby bird, look at its rear end, and if you see a blockage, gently wipe it away with a warm, wet cloth.
It's hands-on, meticulous care. But as the document points out, once they hit 8 weeks old, once those adult feathers come in and they move outside onto the grass, the fragility vanishes. They turn into tiny, feathered, weatherproof tanks. The failure rate drops to almost nothing.
So it's just a short window of stress.
Exactly. So yes, they are incredibly delicate, but that fragility is strictly contained to a very specific, manageable 6-week window.
Okay, time out. I'm with you on the biology, the economics, and the labor curve. But let's deal with the elephant in the room, or rather, the 25-pound bird on the lawn.
I was waiting for this.
Yeah, you're painting this idyllic picture of turkeys foraging in the grass. But I live in a subdivision. My homeowners association measures my grass with a ruler and sends threatening letters if I leave my trash cans out an hour too late.
Yeah, HOAs are tough.
If I put a 25-pound farm animal in my backyard, I'm getting sued, the cities are getting called, and it's going to be a disaster. Is this actually legally feasible for a normal suburbanite?
That is the most common and valid pushback. The legal reality of backyard livestock is undeniably murky, but it is surprisingly more permissive than most people assume. Over the last decade, there's been a massive push for food sovereignty. Roughly 30% of suburban municipalities in the U.S. now have specific small flock ordinances written into their zoning codes.
How do those ordinances usually work?
They generally permit poultry under a certain head count, usually a maximum of 4 to 6 birds, and they mandate strict setback requirements to prevent nuisance issues. For example, the code might state that the enclosure must be at least 25 or 50 feet away from any neighboring property line or dwelling.
But aren't those laws written specifically for chickens?
And that is exactly where the legal gray area works in your favor. Most of these ordinances are written to ban one specific animal, the rooster.
Because of the noise.
Right, because roosters crow at 4 a.m. and cause noise complaints. A turkey is not a rooster. A turkey hen makes a soft, rhythmic chirping sound. Even a tom turkey's gobble is lower in decibels and less frequent than a rooster's crow, though you wouldn't want a tom if your neighbor's window is 10 feet away.
That's a good point.
The text of the law usually permits hens and bans roosters. It rarely mentions the word turkey.
So what is the actionable advice for the listener? Did they just build it and hope for the best?
Never rely on hope with zoning laws. The absolute best advice is to be proactive. Go online and look up your specific local municipal zoning code, search your city's name plus small flock ordinance or backyard poultry, then call the local zoning or planning department.
Just call them up.
Yes. Say clearly, I want to raise 4 turkeys for a 6-month period over the summer to harvest for my family's food. You'd be amazed at how often the zoning officer says yes, provided you adhere to the setback lines and agree not to keep loud breeding toms year-round.
Yeah.
It is a completely solvable problem.
And this brings us to the final, crucial leg of the triad. We have this incredible, highly efficient indoor protein bioreactor running with the mushrooms.
Check.
We have dense, premium animal fats and proteins growing outside on autopilot all summer with the turkeys.
Yeah.
But if you try to live on just mushrooms and meat, you are going to be miserable. You need massive, easily storable carbohydrates to actually survive a winter and pad out your meals.
You need the bulk.
Right. And the document claims you are going to grow the bulk of these calories on a concrete driveway.
This is where we dive into the container garden. And just like the mushrooms and the turkeys, the concept of a container garden suffers from a massive reputation problem in the homesteading community.
Huge. I mean, when I say the words container garden, you don't think of a food supply. You think of a couple of sad, root-bound, yellowing tomato plants dying in plastic pots on a second-story apartment balcony.
Exactly.
It is viewed as a joke. It's the compromise you make when you don't have real land.
But the source demands that we reframe this entirely.
Yeah.
If you understand soil science, a container is not a compromise. It is actually the ultimate controlled root environment. Think about the physics of planting in the ground. When you till up a patch of lawn to make a garden, you are instantly fighting multiple invisible wars.
Like what?
Well, you are fighting severe soil compaction from years of foot traffic, which chokes plant roots of oxygen. You are fighting an entrenched seed bank of native weeds that have been dormant in that soil for decades, waiting for sunlight. You are fighting whatever random unbalanced soil chemistry and pH happens to exist in your local geography.
You're fighting the dirt itself.
Exactly. But in a container, you control 100% of the variables. You dictate the exact soil profile, the exact drainage capacity, and the exact fertility. Because the soil in a container is incredibly loose and aerated, plant roots can penetrate it with zero resistance.
That makes sense.
Biologically, this means the plant spends less energy pushing roots through hard clay and more energy producing above-ground fruit. A properly managed container can actually outproduce native in-ground soil on a square-foot basis.
So the problem isn't the container, the problem is what people are choosing to put inside them.
Precisely. People fill these perfect, highly controlled, expensive environments with the absolute lowest caloric crops on planet Earth. They plant patio tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, and basil.
The salad stuff again.
Right. They are delicious, but as we established with the lettuce math, they are not keeping your family alive during a recession. If you want a 100,000-calorie return from a sunny concrete driveway, there are exactly 4 heavy hitters you need to plant.
Let's break down the heavy hitter list. Number 1, dry beans and cowpeas. We already talked about the calorie math of beans, but how does this work in a bucket?
It works brilliantly because beans are vertical climbers. We are talking about pole bean varieties and climbing cowpeas varieties like iron and clay, pink eye purple hull, or calypso beans. Furthermore, beans are legumes. They literally pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fix it into the soil through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria on their roots.
They fertilize themselves.
They do. Because they grow vertically up a simple cattle panel trellis or strings attached to your fence, a single 5-gallon container can yield 1 to 1.5 pounds of dry, shellable seed.
Let me do the math on that. If you run a line of 20 of these 5-gallon buckets along a chain link fence, which takes up maybe 30 feet of linear space on the edge of your driveway, you are producing up to 48,000 calories of shelf-stable, complete carbohydrates and proteins.
Which is incredible for a driveway.
That is over a full month of baseline caloric needs for an adult human grown in plastic buckets against a fence.
Next on the heavy hitter list, sweet potatoes. Now, sweet potatoes are not glamorous. They aren't Instagram friendly, but their yield to space ratio is unbelievable. You grow these in large 10 to 15 gallon fabric grow bags.
Why fabric?
The fabric is crucial because it allows the soil to breathe and prevents the roots from circling and choking themselves.
Right.
In a warm climate with a long summer, or if you use a black plastic heat cover over the soil in a cooler northern zone, a single 15-gallon bag will yield 4 to 8 pounds of dense sweet potatoes.
And the biological mechanism for starting them is the best part. Sweet potato slips, the little green plant shoots you need to start the crop, are entirely free after your first year.
Right, because the sweet potato is a tuber designed for propagation. To get new plants, you literally take one single sweet potato from last year's harvest that you saved in your pantry, suspend it half submerged in a jar of water on your windowsill in March, and it will sprout dozens of new, rooted green shoots seeking light.
That's so easy.
They snap those shoots off, plant them in the bags, and you have your new crop. Your seed input cost drops to zero permanently.
The third heavy hitter is what the source affectionately calls calorie squash. We are talking about dense winter squash. Buttercup, butternut, Hubbard varieties.
Winter squash is a sprawling plant, so you have to choose compact bush varieties if you're using containers. A variety like butterbush butternut is perfect. You plant these in large 25-gallon half barrels. You can fit 2 plants comfortably in 1 barrel, and they will yield 4 to 6 full-sized heavy squash per season.
Wow.
That is up to 3,000 calories per barrel of complex carbohydrates and vitamin A.
And the absolute magic of winter squash is its biological self-preservation mechanism. You don't have to can it. You don't have to buy a chest freezer for it. You don't have to dehydrate it.
It's nature's packaging.
Yes. As the squash matures on the vine in the autumn, its skin physically hardens into an impenetrable armor that locks moisture in and keeps bacteria out. You literally just wipe the dirt off, set it on a shelf in a cool, dark room, and it acts as its own biological Tupperware. It lasts for 3 to 6 months sitting on a shelf.
Which brings us to the absolute undisputed king of caloric yield, potatoes.
Yes, the potato towers. This is the one that everyone wants to try.
And for good reason. The biology of a potato plant is uniquely suited to upward growth in containers. Potatoes will generally yield roughly 1 to 1.5 pounds of food for every single pound of seed potato you plant, and they do it in a blistering 70 to 90 days.
So fast.
If you use a tall 15-gallon grow bag, you utilize the mounding technique. You plant the seed potato at the bottom with just a few inches of soil. As the green stem grows up toward the light, you continually add more soil, burying the stem. The buried stem then shoots out lateral roots that form layers upon layers of new tubers. You can harvest 10 to 15 pounds of eating potatoes from a single bag.
And because they grow so fast, you can run succession crops. If you run 10 bags in the spring, harvest them in July, and immediately replant 10 more bags for a late fall harvest, you are pulling 70,000 to 100,000 calories from just 10 fabric bags sitting on your driveway.
That is no longer a hobby garden. That is a legitimate, crisis-proof staple food supply. But we have to look at the economics, because filling 40 containers with dirt is not cheap.
Right. Soil is incredibly expensive if you buy it by the bag at a big box store. The year one budget for a 30 to 40 container setup is going to run you $250 to $460.
The containers themselves can be sourced cheaply. You can buy 5-gallon buckets from a hardware store for $4. Or if you're willing to hustle, you go to a local bakery, a deli, or a restaurant and ask for their empty food-grade frosting or pickle buckets.
Oh, that's a great tip.
They usually throw them away and will give them to you for free. Just drill drainage holes in the bottom. 15-gallon fabric grow bags are very cheap online. The massive cost is the potting mix.
Yeah, you need 300 to 400 pounds of high-quality commercial mix. A premium brand like Fox Farm Ocean Forest is amazing, but it will bankrupt you at scale, so you have to mix your own.
Exactly.
You buy bulk compost from a local municipal facility, you buy large compressed bales of peat moss or coconut coir for moisture retention, and bags of perlite for drainage. Add in $30 to $60 for open-pollinated heirloom seeds that you can save year after year, and a gallon of liquid fish emulsion fertilizer to keep the nutrients high.
But again, just like the turkeys, year 2 is where the financial return skyrockets. Your cost plummets to $80 to $120. You reuse all the buckets and bags. You save your own bean and squash seeds. You grow your own potato slips. You don't throw the soil away. You just top dress it with a few inches of fresh compost to recharge the microbiology, and you plant again.
There is a psychological aspect to the container garden that the source highlights, and I think it is brilliant. They refer to it as psychological stickiness.
It's all about the dopamine feedback loop. Think about the other systems. When you are inoculating mushroom blocks in your basement, you are staring at a plastic bag of wet sawdust for 3 weeks, waiting for a microscopic white thread to do something. It requires abstract faith.
Yeah, it's boring.
When you're raising turkeys, you are waiting 6 solid months for the caloric payoff. It's a marathon, but the container garden. You push a bean seed into the soil, and a week later, a thick green shoot punches through the dirt. A month later, there are bright purple flowers.
It's immediate.
You see daily, visible, tangible progress. That visual reward system keeps the homesteader motivated and emotionally engaged, while the other systems are in their long, invisible lag phases.
But we have to address the fatal flaw here, the open loop of the container garden. Because it's not all sunshine and fast growth. Actually, sunshine is the problem.
Water and sun. This is the ultimate physical constraint. Containers dry out incredibly fast. When you plant in the ground, the soil mass acts as a massive thermal heat sink and a moisture reservoir.
Great.
But a container is exposed to the ambient air temperature and the beating sun on all 360 degrees. A black, plastic 5-gallon bucket in the full July sun acts like an oven. The plant will transpire water faster than it can pull it up. That bucket might need to be deeply watered twice a day just to keep a mature bean plant alive.
If you have 40 containers, manual watering with a hose becomes a massive, inescapable daily time sink. It will literally break you. You will come home from work, see wilted plants, spend 40 minutes standing there with a hose, and you will hate your garden.
The source teases the absolute mandatory solution. You have to install a drip irrigation system. People hear irrigation system and think of plumbers and trenching.
Yeah.
No, it is cheap plastic tubing that you cut with scissors.
Anyone can do it.
You run a mainline tube across the buckets, punch in tiny emitter valves that drip water directly onto the soil surface, and you attach the whole thing to a $30 battery-powered timer hooked directly to your outdoor hose spigot.
So it runs itself.
You set it to run for 15 minutes at 6 a.m. and 15 minutes at 4 p.m. It utilizes capillary action in the soil to perfectly water the root zone. It completely automates the single biggest chore of the garden, and it saves massive amounts of water through reduced evaporation. Do not skip the drip irrigation.
So let's step back and look at the puzzle pieces we have assembled. We have these 3 distinct optimized systems. We have the oyster mushrooms running a steady protein cycle indoors. We have the heritage turkeys efficiently converting bugs and grass into premium meat outside. And we have the heavy hitter calorie crops churning out storable carbohydrates in automated containers on the driveway.
It's a complete package.
Separately, they are neat little hobby projects, but together they form what the document officially calls the master stack.
And this master stack concept is the antidote to the great tragedy of the homesteading movement. This is where we have to talk deeply about why beginners fail in year 3, the burnout cycle.
It is a tragedy in 3 acts, and it happens to almost everyone. Act 1, year 1, the family starts a garden, they build a few raised beds, it goes great, they get a harvest, they take pictures, they feel amazing.
We all know that phase.
Act 2. Year 2 hits. They say, we conquered vegetables, let's add livestock, let's get chickens. So they spend weeks building the coop. But now their total time load has doubled. They are trying to manage the expanding garden A&D, doing daily morning and evening chicken chores.
And then comes year 3.
Act 3. Year 3. The novelty of the chickens completely wears off, but the daily chores remain. Half their mental bandwidth and time goes just to keeping the birds alive and the coop clean. The garden gets neglected, the weeds take over the raised beds, the squash bugs destroy the crop. They're working twice as hard, sweating twice as much as they did in year 1, but they are producing less total food. They burn out, they sell the chickens on Craigslist, and they quit entirely.
And the heartbreaking part is that they internalize that failure. They think they failed because they are lazy or because they just aren't cut out for the country life. But they didn't fail because they're lazy. They failed because of poor structural design.
Right.
They stacked overlapping labor curves. They layered daily, non-negotiable animal chores directly on top of intense seasonal gardening chores. They created a peak labor load that a normal working adult simply cannot sustain.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this document, the 90-day sequencing solution. It's like a relay race, or an automated factory floor where the heavy labor physically shifts from one department to another, so no single department ever gets overwhelmed.
That's the perfect analogy.
It proves that you don't need more hours in the day. You just need biological systems that demand your peak attention at completely different times of the calendar year.
Let's map this relay race out month by month to see how these 3 systems interact flawlessly across a calendar year.
We start with the baseline, the mushrooms. The mushrooms are your metronome. They require a flat 45 minutes a week, indoors, in the climate-controlled basement, year-round. It never spikes, it never dips. It's just a steady, predictable hum of protein production, regardless of what is happening outside.
Then spring arrives. You layer in the container garden. March, April, and May demand heavy prep and active labor. You're moving soil, setting up the buckets, planting the seeds, wrestling with the drip irrigation tubing, and testing the timers. Your outdoor labor peaks. But you can handle it because you don't have any livestock yet.
Right. And just as you finish planting the garden in May, the turkey poults arrive. But they live in a box in the garage, so you spend 20 minutes a day checking on them while the garden starts to grow. Then June hits. The intense heat of summer arrives. And what happens to the garden?
The drip irrigation timer takes over, the garden goes semi-automatic, your heavy lifting is done. You are simply walking by every few days, checking for pests, and maybe pulling a stray weed. Your labor drops.
And right as the garden goes on autopilot, what happens to the turkeys? They're fully feathered, they move outside onto the grass. Their labor curve drops from fragile daily brooder management down to a simple 15-minute daily feed and water check.
So look at July and August, the hottest, most miserable months of summer, when you naturally want to be outside working the least.
Yet no one wants to work in August.
Exactly. All three systems are humming along in their absolute lowest labor phases simultaneously. The garden is watering itself on a timer. The turkeys are aggressively foraging in the yard, essentially feeding themselves. The mushrooms are just doing their thing in the cool basement. You are producing massive amounts of calories, and you are spending maybe 30 minutes a day total managing all of it.
Then autumn arrives. The temperature drops. The relay baton passes again. The container garden demands a sudden surge of intense labor for the final heavy harvest. You are spending weekends pulling dozens of pounds of potatoes out of the grow bags, digging up the sweet potatoes and laying them out to cure, and hauling the heavy winter squash inside to the pantry shelves. You clear the driveway.
And right after you finish securing that massive carbohydrate harvest, November hits. The turkeys have reached their maximum processing weight. The baton passes to the livestock. You have one intense, focused, highly physical weekend to process the birds, shrink wrap the meat, and fill the chest freezer.
And then, December through February. The relay race is over. The turkeys are gone from the yard. The container garden is completely packed away and empty. You are back to exactly where you started. Just 45 minutes a week managing your indoor mushroom blocks while eating roasted sweet potatoes and premium turkey meat pulled directly from your own storage.
It's a beautiful system.
By intentionally stacking these specific three systems because of their unique biological timelines, you can genuinely offset a quarter of a family's food budget without ever peaking your weekly labor load beyond what a normal, busy, commuting adult can handle.
It really leaves you with a profound philosophical shift. When you look at the math and the biology of the backyard sufficiency stack, you realize that building real resilience in your life isn't about acquiring massive, sprawling acreage. It isn't about saving up $1 million to escape the modern world and go live in a cabin in Montana.
Yeah.
True sufficiency is about optimizing the micro spaces that we completely ignore every single day. The dark 10 by 10 spare corner of the basement, the empty 3 feet of concrete on the edge of the driveway, the 40 square feet of unused lawn behind the garage.
It's all right there.
It forces you to ask a broader question. What other areas of our modern lives are we stubbornly trying to solve with 40-acre thinking, assuming we need massive capital and total life overhauls, when a highly efficient, small-scale quarter-acre strategy is sitting right in front of us, just waiting to be optimized?
It changes everything. You've heard the math, you see exactly how the biological labor curves stack together like puzzle pieces, and you know exactly why the standard aesthetic-driven homesteading advice is setting you up to fail. You can start the mushrooms indoors next week. You can order the grow bags for the driveway tomorrow.
The plants are easy to start.
But taking the leap with the outdoor livestock, moving from plants to actual meat production, is where most beginners freeze. The fear of failure with a live animal is paralyzing. You need the complete, unedited playbook. The source document we've been analyzing today literally serves as a step-by-step operational manual, and it's available right now.
It really is a game changer.
Go check out the KDP Workbook 34 Heritage Turkeys for Beginner Homesteading. It is the definitive, no-nonsense guide that takes you by the hand from ordering your very first poults to building the perfect Suburban turkey tractor, complete with exact brooder temperature logs, daily feed schedules, and legal checklists for your zoning board. It is the absolute natural next step to cure that paralysis and turn your quarter acre into a genuine, budget-altering calorie engine. Grab your copy of 34 Heritage Turkeys for Beginner Homesteading today and start building your sufficiency stack. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be that family staring at a $6,200 pile of custom lumber, holding a single $14